to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
Well, you just knew someone was going to do some law fighting musically on the program. Our producer, Dwayne Bishop. I'm Sterling Fox, joined in studio by Joe Murphy, QC, and Alex Sein-Wittgenstein from Murphy Batista, LLP, Vancouver personal injury lawyers. We're talking wrongful death on the program for the very first time on The Law Show. This has been on the air for a couple of years, Alex, and this is the first time we've actually broached this subject and particularly devoted an hour to it. We've talked about some remarkable facts here, including the fact that here in our beloved province of BC, there's something called the Family Compensation Act, which tends on a really good day to devalue people's lives on an economic scale. I'm being rather brusque about it, but that's what it boils down to. If you don't contribute economically to the fabric of society, you're not worth anything, and the government will be the first to tell you.
That's right. And again, we're talking about how the Act limits recovery to only the economic worth that someone has given, gives to other family members.
Right.
And if they're not deemed to be, if there isn't a net gain from having that person from an economic perspective, the case isn't worth anything.
Now, Alex just told me during the break, Joe, and you nodded sagely, he's been in the business at least 20 years, you much longer. One of the most difficult parts of the job, Alex told me, is to try and tell the loved ones of a person who's been killed that that person, in the eyes of the courts in British Columbia, has no value.
That's right. It's
that's astonishing.
And as we've said before, that's unlike most other provinces in Canada. And so we're dealing with a situation, again, where it could be an absolutely devastating event to a family, and we then have to tell them that we fully understand that you must be... there must be tremendous grief and having to rebuild your lives as a result of this. But under the Family Compensation Act, you are likely to recover next to nothing. And let me give you a real example of the sorts of situations that we deal with, because we're trying to calculate what the economic benefit of this person is. We have to hire economists.
Sure.
And as experts to do a calculation and see what income they were bringing in, what the value of the homemaking services they might have brought in is worth, and deduct from that the expense of having that person remain a member of the household. The defense will likewise get a report, and we'll sometimes receive reports. Could be in relation to the death of someone who was a homemaker. Maybe it's a stay-at-home mom who's passed away, where the economist for the defense actually comes up with a report that says you're actually the family is better off financially because of the death of this person. So not only is it worth nothing, but actually you're at a financial advantage now that this person is gone. You can hire a nanny who's going to cost you less than it cost you to feed and clothe and house this person.
And they advance this opinion with a straight face.
They do, and try and present that to your client without and being able to provide a rational explanation as to how this can be in this modern age.
Well, and Joe Murphy, how do you sit there and how do you explain this?
Well, Sterling, it's most difficult when it's the death of a child. If it's the death of an older person, it's different because this person was nearing the end of their life anyways. But a death of a child triggers such grief and such emotion, such anger with parents, to then have to say to them this claim against the responsible person whose negligence killed your child is worth next to nothing. It's terrible. And what I have to do to these people is repeatedly tell them, this is not the value of your child's life. This is simply how this old act, this ancient, antiquated act, operates.
Right.
So I try and get them not to focus in on the injustice of this act, but deal with their grief. But it is so difficult, and these people are already grieving. They're already so angry and upset. To try and tell them the law says your child's life is worth nothing just compounds that.
It'd just take the legs out from underneath you, wouldn't it? Holy smokes.
It's a disgrace.
And yet, Alex, we do read and hear reports of wrongful death awards in substantial amounts of money. So they do happen, don't they?
They do from time to time, and it all just depends on, again, what sort of income bracket the person who died in was in. So a couple cases that come to mind would be, for instance, a laser eye surgeon who was killed in a motor vehicle accident, and he was well into his 60s at that point in time, but was making a healthy amount of money, and a judgment at trial was given in the amount of over $6 million in that case. So there you see, where you have the death of someone in their 60s, where it's worth $6 million, but in another situation,
when a person is 6,
it's worth zero.
It's worth zero.
Yeah.
It is just so odd, Joe. And I guess, again, and I was looking at you nodding at Alex, talking about Alex is telling me about how tough it must be to have to sit down to a grieving mom and dad and try and explain that one. Wrap your heads around this one. The government essentially doesn't care. Because if they did, there would be some kind of award. And I'm putting words in your mouth that you don't use.
I don't understand, Sterling, why the governments over the last 30 years haven't changed the law.
Right.
I don't know why any of them would be encouraged to do this, other than to realize that a change in the law is going to result in ICBC paying out money on claims that currently they don't pay out on, or pay out peanuts on.
Right. And Alex, there was an attempt. They came kind of close-ish in 2011. It might have been an election year, so maybe they were doing some performing, but they never did get it done. There was talk about it, and that's as close as it's ever got to changing that old law.
Yeah, there was an attempt made by, I think it was a private member's bill in 2011 to actually include compensation for grief in the Family Compensation Act. Unfortunately, that bill died after the first reading and has never been moved forward as far as I'm aware since. So the law remains essentially the same as it was back in the 1800s in England. And
BC being the only jurisdiction probably left that has it hasn't fine-tuned it even a bit since its initial installation in the books.
I can't speak for every province, but definitely the vast majority of provinces in Canada have modernized their statutes to allow for recovery for grief.
This is The Law Show. You're listening to CIL 650. More still ahead. Stay with us.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CIL 650.